Easy to throw.
Do you want to tell them to go off video?
Oh yes, can anyone who's not speaking turn their video off, please? Thank you. Sorry, I should say hello. Susie, we're ready to start. Can you let us know when the meeting is broadcasting?
Good evening and welcome to a meeting of the South Oxfordshire District Council and Vale of Whitehorse District Council's Joint Audit and Governance Committee. My name is Mike Piggles and I will be chairing this meeting tonight. This meeting is being held at our office in Abbey House, Abingdon. Voting members are here in person as required, but officers and public speakers are able to join remotely via Microsoft Teams. The meeting is being streamed live and recorded on the Council's YouTube channel for public viewing. I have a few housekeeping announcements. First item is the evacuation procedure. In the event of emergency, please evacuate the building by the nearest exit. And in this case, it is to the corridor over on the right, the meeting room, and stand at assembly point 9 in the outside area beyond the fire exit. On arriving at this meeting, you should have signed in the fire register. Please inform the Democratic Services Officer if you have not. For those joining remotely, when you are not speaking, please ensure your microphone is muted and your camera is off. Put on. Item 3, please can everyone ensure that their mobile telephones and any other devices are switched to silent during the meeting. As a modern council, both officers and members will use their electronic devices throughout the meeting. Finally, if councillors wish to speak or participate in the debate, please raise your hand and I'll call on you in turn. Okay, so first item is apologies for absence. And I have any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair. We've had apologies from Independent Member Mike Boone and Councillor Andrew Tinsley.
Thank you. We now come onto the minutes of the previous meeting on the 27th of January 2026 to agree as a correct record. Please can I have a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Skinner. And can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Dragonetti. Those in favour to accept the correct record, please raise your hands. We'll just wait for Councillor Roberts to sit down for continuing. Thank you. Item 4 of the agenda, please can we have any declarations of interest? Apologies. We appear to have none. And then item 5 is urgent business. Please can officers inform the committee if there are any urgent business to note. Just to confirm, there's no urgent business required of this committee. Item 6, public participation. Have we received any questions or statements from members of the public that have registered to speak?
There are no registered.
Thank you. So now we move on to the first item, which is item 7, which is the External Auditor's Audit Completion Report for 2024 to 2025. I suggest that we consider agenda item 11 alongside item 7 as both relate to each other. That is the completion of the auditor's audit completion report, which covers a financial statement, as well as the auditor's annual report, which covers a wider kind of governance and kind of other issues. These reports will be presented by representatives of the Council's external auditors, Bishop Fleming, which I know you're there, so if you can come back online.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm going to present our audit completion report, which I'll refer to as the ACR, and hand over to Alex then, who will present the auditor's annual report. Reports, sorry. So for the ACR, which we're presenting.
Can you just reintroduce yourself?
Apologies. Yeah. So
what your roles are?
Yeah, of course. So my name's Neil Hollis. I'm the senior audit manager for from Bishop Fleming on these audits. I'll let Alex introduce herself when she comes on to her reports, if that's okay. Thank you. So for the audit completion reports, we're presenting these to you before you approve your accounts, and they summarise our findings from the audit of the financial statements, detail amendments that have been made, and make recommendations in respect of processes and procedures. You'll note that both these reports are draft. We'll issue the final versions after we've issued our audit opinion. I'll take the reports as read, so we'll just focus on some of the more important areas, but I'm happy to take any questions afterwards, and I might bring Alex in if there are any questions as well on these. So I'll go through both the reports as one and just note where there are differences between the two councils, if that's okay.
Let's do the answers. Sorry.
Hi.
I'm sorry, who are you? Sorry.
Kate Gregory, Councillor Kate Gregory. I'm substituting for Andrew Frinsley.
The substitutes list is an issue.
Can you just confirm Councillor Gregory is on the substitutes list?
So, no, Councillor Gregory is not as a named substitute, but I did check the constitution just in case you arrived, and it states that if not possible, a member of the same political party can substitute if they've had the relevant training. And we did email you earlier. Oh, did you, Councillor Gregory?
Yeah.
We've got our head of legal and democratic here, Nick.
Just before, so Nick, can you kind of just rule on whether Councillor Gregory can sit on this committee?
It turns on the training, Chair, and I don't know I think Lucy was about to give us the detail of whether the councillor has completed the relevant training, or maybe the councillor herself, one of them can confirm the position, then I can give authoritative decision.
Councillor Gregory hasn't.
I haven't received any specific training for this committee now.
All right, then I'm afraid constitutionally then you're restricted and can't substitute at this time. It has to be either a named substitute, which I think Lucy was about to say, and I'm sorry for speaking over you, Lucy, a named substitute that's already been allocated, in which case they'll get the training as of right, or a person who's undertaken the training. And since you haven't undertaken the training, I'm afraid the Constitution, the reason it's in the Constitution is to make sure that people making these decisions, which are about the governance of the whole organisation, fully understand the legal and other requirements. So I'm afraid it's not an arbitrary element which we can bend to, Chair. So I wouldn't suggest there's any scope for you to use any further discretion, I'm afraid. Of course, the councillor is welcome to stay as a visitor and observe, if you like, as a silent observer, but shouldn't be a participant and certainly shouldn't vote in these matters, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Nick. My apologies. I mean,
That's all right.
obviously, you come here with the best of intentions, and you're more than welcome to sit and listen to the meeting.
That's all right. I'll leave you guys to it. I'll let Andrew know though. That's all right. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
My apologies to you. Sorry to interrupt your presentation, but if you want to continue, that would be great.
Yeah, no problem at all. Okay, thank you. I think I was in the middle of saying that I'll go through the two reports as one, but just highlight where there are differences between the two councils. So the headline for these reports is that, as in previous years, the opinion, as expected, will be disclaimed. So this is due to lack of assurance over the opening balances coming from the prior year's disclaimed opinions. Later on in this report, I'll come on to how we intend to build back assurance so that we can ultimately issue a unqualified opinion. So going through the reports, section 2 of the report shows the materiality levels for each council. So this is a level, the area above which we feel that a misstatement would impact the decision of the users of the accounts. So for South Oxfordshire, this figures are about 2 million, and Vale of Whitehorse about 1.4 million. Section 2 also highlights a number of areas in which we had hoped to complete the work, but as of the issuing of the draft versions for committee, these remained outstanding. While some of these have been resolved, there are a number that remain outstanding and for which we will have to consider doing additional work to build back assurance as part of that exercise. Coming on to section 3 then, that gives some feedback on the accounts and audit processes. I'd start by saying that we have picked up a bit more this year probably because this was really the first year of us doing a full audit. Like last year for the 23-24 audit, there was limited time between the prior year accounts being the disclaimed opinion being issued and the backstop date of the end of February, where we've had to finish our work by issue opinion. So yeah, we've picked up a bit more this year. So some of the issues that we've flagged are the fact that the accounts were revised after the initial draft was provided to us, and the changes were required to this version because of information not agreeing to supporting records. Some issues with the working papers, and we've also highlighted there's a section which is referred to as staff availability. This really is referring to delays which we encountered in response to requests for information which sat outside the main finance team. And I'll come on to all of these a little bit more when we come on to the management recommendations later on in the report. Section 4 summarises the key risks that we identified as part of our planning and our responses to these. So in summary, we didn't identify any significant issues with regards to management override. We did identify one material amendment at each council in regards to the pension valuation, which I'll come on to later. And with regards to the risks around land and building valuations and investment property valuations, we were unable to complete work on these. Section 5 shows the adjustments that have been made which are above our reporting threshold. At each council, we have the aforementioned pensions amendment. This is due to IFRIC 14, which is International Financial Reporting Interpretations Committee, Interpretation 14, and that's to do with the amount where there's an asset, a pension asset, whether it can be recognised or not. And there's a report that the actuary provided which says that it can't, basically. So that needs to be amended for. There's also a reclassification between short-term and long-term debtors at each council, although the figure itself is a lot higher at 3.9 million. There were also reclassifications on the face of the comprehensive income and expenditure statement at each body. For these, it was VOWH, where the larger amendment was, which was about 14 million. It's probably worth noting at this point that there were also additional changes made to the final version of the accounts, which we weren't anticipating. So we've been unable to fully audit some of these, which did include material reclassifications. Whilst this is not ideal for us, because of a disclaimed opinion anyway, it doesn't impact. Because we disclaimed anyway, it doesn't impact our opinion. So we will look at considering what we need to do on these as part of our build back work. This is section 5 also highlights additional disclosure and narrative amendments. I won't go through all of these, but you can see some of them are reasonably large in value, but just do relate to disclosure amendments. Happy to take any questions on any of those at the end of this as well. So moving on to section 6, which is our management letter points. I'll just go through the red and amber points, which are those which we deem for which we deem the issues to be either fundamental or important to the system of internal control. I'm happy to talk about any of the green points as well if anyone would like to do so. So we've got 3 red recommendations at South. So the first is on supporting working papers, where we encountered a large number of issues with these on that audit, which delayed our work and also resulted in there being material amendments to the financial statements as a result. We have had a similar point on VOWH, but the issues were not as significant, so we've rated that as amber in that report. The second point on second red point on South, which is the same as VOWH, concerns delays we faced in getting supporting evidence, which especially where this related to documentation from personnel outside of the central finance team. And then the third point on here, which is the same with both bodies, concerns issues relating to property, plant and equipment. Then with regards to the amber recommendations, at both bodies we've included recommendations that there needs to be a sufficient level of quality assurance so that the initial draft accounts are of sufficient quality and don't need amending, that comprehensive bank reconciliations are completed in a timely manner, and that capital commitments are clearly agreed through to working papers. In addition, at South only, we included recommendations around documentation for capital grant receipts in advance and leases. So the next section of the report concerns the building back of assurance, which I referred to earlier. So it gives a bit of a background on how we came to be in the position that we are with this, and sets out a 3-phase approach, of which phase 1 is complete. which is a goal of issuing a qualified opinion rather than disclaimed for 2025-26, and an unqualified opinion in 2026-27. I would add that this approach is reliant on us being able to complete work on some of the areas that we were not able to finish during the 24-25 audit, and also on the recommendations that we have raised being implemented going forwards. The final section of the main body of the report is the other matters section, which includes details on the fee variations that we've raised this year. These are where we've been required to carry out additional work over and above our expectations. So where this is the case, we do absorb some of the cost ourselves and have discussed all of these with management previously. The categories are the same for each body, although the amounts differ as they are dependent on the level of work that was required. So the categories that these come under are implementation of IFRS 16, which is around the adoption of that standard in relation to leases, the rebuilding of assurance, so the build back work that we've done already, the issues that we have had with supporting working papers, property, plant and equipment, IFIC 14, which is a pension issue that I mentioned earlier. And there's also one with regards to the significant weakness on our value for money work, which Alex will come on to when she presents the auditor's annual report. I do also need to highlight that there is an error in the adding up on the VOWH report. The total should be 186,624. So we'll amend that for the final version of the report. So that is pretty much everything I was going to say on the reports. So our plan is that once the accounts have been approved and we've received the relevant signed documentation, we'll sign our opinion in the accounts and get these back to you. We've set aside time for that tomorrow, so ideally, which would then allow you time to meet your statutory responsibility to publish the accountability statements by the backstop date of Friday. And I would just like to finish off by thanking Simon, Richard and the team. Although we have raised a reasonable number of issues in the reports, I don't think these have come about as a result of the finance team being uncooperative or helpful. Indeed, they have been open with us throughout the process, and we already had some conversations about how we can work together going forwards and how we can learn from the audit on an ongoing basis. Thank you. Happy to take any questions on that.
Do you want to let Alex do the annual report first, and then we'll go to questions?
No problem. Thank you.
Unmute, Alex.
Unmute.
Thank you. Sorry, I was just saying, just bear with me. I'm just trying to find the right page in the report. So the two reports that you've got in front of you are what's known as the auditor's annual report. We're required under the NAO code to produce these, and we're required to do this at the end of the audit, which is why these two reports are draft, and they won't actually be finalised until we've actually given the audit opinion, because at that point I can say, given the the disclaimed opinion on such and such a date, it'll be final. The report is then a public document, so it need to go on your website. But obviously, when I send all this stuff out to Simon and the finance team, I'll make that clear as to what the sort of the next steps in the process are. And just very quickly, just picking up on something that Neil mentioned. Neil mentioned about the backstop date being Friday. We've become aware that MHCLG are actually monitoring people publishing their accounts and their AARs and AGS and everything that sits with your accounts. So it's something to be aware of in terms of making sure you get, you don't fall foul of the backstop date. So as I say, the two reports you've got in front of you, one relates to South Oxfordshire, one relates to VOWH Horse. Very, very similar reports. Obviously, some of the numbers in there are slightly different because obviously they're in different financial positions. But obviously a lot of your overall arrangements are very similar across the two entities. So obviously the report actually reflects that. As you're probably aware from previous years, the three areas that we're required to look at by the NAO code are financial sustainability, governance, and the 3 E's, economy, efficiency and effectiveness. Just to be clear, what we're looking at is the arrangements that you've got in place. We're not actually saying whether you're delivering value for money or not. That's not the auditor's role. So we're looking at the arrangements in place to make sure that you can deliver those particular areas. Now, you will have seen previous drafts of these reports because they were circulated back at the end of November. Again, requirement of the NEO code to actually do that and make sure that you've seen sight of them by the end of November. But I appreciate that was outside of the committee process, so therefore that's why we're bringing them back today, really, because we thought it was useful for you to have sight of them while we're here. And obviously, if you've got any questions, you can raise those with us. So I'm going to skip to the exec summary in the reports. Just bear with me. It's page 70. So the exec summary, so the auditor's annual report covers a number of things. It talks a bit about the accounts, but if I talk about the accounts, I'll be repeating what Neil's already said to you. Obviously talks about the key area that's actually within these reports is what's known as the VFM commentary. So that's the bit that I'm kind of going to focus on because that's probably the bit that you're most interested in. So in terms of the exec summary, you'll see in the table that we've put amber for financial sustainability and the 3 E's. And the reason for that is you may argue that our traffic light system is perhaps a little bit crude, but we take the view that if all the arrangements are in place and we're not making any recommendations, however minor, it's a green. If it's amber, it means that we've made some recommendations. Now, there may be fairly low-level recommendations and maybe more about improving the arrangements rather than being anything more fundamental. Red is an area that we think is more fundamental, and it's what's classed as a significant weakness in the NEO's code and their guidance that they produce. So in terms of financial sustainability and 3 E's, as I say, we've rated them as amber, and that's because we've raised some recommendations which are later on in the report. As I say, not areas that we consider to be particularly significant, but obviously areas that we think that you can improve on. And I appreciate that. I think one of them that we've made is around having a formal savings plan. And I know we've had some conversations with Simon and the finance team about what is that necessary if you're in a relatively positive financial position. Our view is, well, you may be at the moment, but look down the track, you don't know what's going to happen. I appreciate LGR is going to actually change some of that, but we still think that sort of thing and starting to get into those sort of thought processes and the culture of working like that is actually good practice. I think we also have some recommendations that have been raised in previous years that we felt actually were still outstanding or needed to be tweaked. The number of recommendations that we've made in the amber areas are fairly small, so we are not talking large numbers of recommendations. The area though that we have rated as red is in governance, and that was predominantly about implementation of internal audit recommendations. Now, last year, you may recall me sitting here and delivering this report and saying to you that we were slightly concerned about the large number of internal audit recommendations that remained outstanding, and that we felt that perhaps the authorities needed to start to reduce the number that were left outstanding. I think unfortunately, when we've looked at 24-25, that wasn't the trajectory we were seeing. Actually, we were seeing that potentially the numbers are either the same or going up slightly, and the actions weren't being taken. Now, obviously, you've had your internal audit opinion, which hasn't raised any significant issues. However, there are still, in our view, and based on what we've seen elsewhere within the local government sector and also the NHS sector, we think there's quite a lot of recommendations there that remain outstanding. We don't think this is necessarily a fundamental governance issue. I think this is just more about housekeeping, keeping a track on the recommendations, being realistic about, can you implement those recommendations? Can you implement them within the timescales? Pushing back potentially on some of the recommendations if you feel that, given everything else that's on your plate, is that really a recommendation that you need to actually address at the time? And we also felt that there was a role as well for you as the the Joint Audit and Governance Committee as well, in terms of holding people to account. And actually what we've seen in another local authorities, admittedly it doesn't happen in a huge amount, it certainly happens in the NHS sector quite a bit, where officers are actually asked to come along to the committee and almost, you know, be accountable for those recommendations and actually talk through what the issues are, why perhaps things haven't been implemented. Often it's for good reason, but it's about you as a committee actually understanding those reasons. So we've, as part of the recommendation we've made, we've actually put that in as well. Now, I appreciate that you will see from the finance team's response to that recommendation that they don't necessarily agree, but we just felt, and obviously we've been through an internal peer process to actually consider that, but actually we just felt, because of the sheer number that were outstanding, it suggested that actually more could be done to actually address those recommendations. And as I say, what we haven't done is gone through every single individual recommendation to assess whether you know, it's valid, has it been implemented, it should have been implemented. We haven't done that. We've just really kind of looked at the bald figures that have been actually reported to yourselves throughout the year. That was pretty much all I was going to say. I mean, obviously Neil did touch on fees. Where a significant weakness has been raised, obviously there's additional work that's actually been undertaken. In this case, it's mainly been undertaken by Neil and myself, so at a more senior level, and that unfortunately does trip a fee variation. Obviously that will go through PSAA in due course, and they'll consider the validity of that fee variation, but that's why there's an additional fee that you would have seen in the ACR when Neil went through it. I'm happy to stop there, Chair, if that's okay. And
yes, thank
any
you.
questions?
Just before we kind of move into questions, Mary, Simon, is there anything you'd like to kind of add to the commentary by Bishop Fleming about the forward, just to set maybe some context before we ask our questions?
Yeah, no, thank you. First of all, thank you to Alex and Neil and the team at Bishop Fleming for their work. And I think it's fair to say that we do work well together between auditor and team. I think it's probably just worth spelling out because just for everyone's clarity, you know, I think we were always going to get a disclaimed opinion this year, and that's the reality of where we are in terms of the audit build back process. As has been spelled out, I think the aim next year is to get qualified, which this year I've been in local government for 30 years telling people that qualified accounts are bad. Actually next year they'll be good for once time only, because they'll be better than a disclaimed opinion. And then the following year, which, you know, by which time, you know, it's been the final throes of the authority on the current government timeline, will be back to unqualified accounts. I think where we are with this report is it's disclaimed, but we probably haven't got as far with building back as we would all have liked. So I think that's the reality of where we are. But the reality, but you know, as you said, we were always going to get a disclaimed opinion. I think there are a couple of points I just wanted to draw attention to from the thing. I think the last point that Alex was talking about with internal audit recommendations, I mean, we've discussed those a lot here. I would make the point that actually you have brought back, in the context of health and safety, you have brought back health and safety to this committee on a regular basis, and you're all aware that there are a lot of red, you know, high risk recommendations in health and safety that you know are going to take time to come back, and I think you're holding that team to account on that, and there's potential for us to look at that a bit more. I think myself and Victoria are having another look at the list of recommendations, because to be honest, we suspect some of them aren't valid anymore. I think the time's passed, so we're doing that work. I think what I want to get going forward is a sort of shared understanding with Richard's team and with the Bishop Fleming team about making sure that we sort of timetable in and schedule the build back work, so we're all aware of what exactly we're expecting to do going forward. I think
it might be, because I know there's a couple of new members of the committee, but build back might not be able to they understand.
Yeah, so I suppose in simple terms, the main reason we're getting a disclaimed opinion this year is because if I go back 2 years, we got basically the EY didn't audit the accounts at all. So you can't place reliance on the opening balances. So that's the fundamental reason why we're getting disclaimed opinions. You can't rely on the opening balances. So we've got to do some work in building back assurance on those opening balances. I'm thinking in particular of the balance sheet. And I'm thinking in particular of reserves, if I'm entirely honest, because if you think about a balance sheet, apologies to the non-accountants in the room, but effectively the balance sheet is about what you own and what you owe. Now, in terms of what we own, we've got registers of our assets. We can take those off to valuation reports. We can see invoices for creditors and debtors. We can see all that. But the reserves, I can't call off a report that tells you what should be in reserves. That's officer transactions. And if I was dishonest in my role, that's the number I would try and amend to ideally make the reserves look bigger to make us look in a better position. I'm telling you now, I'm not doing that, but I'm just pointing out that's what I would do. So that's the bit that they need to do some work on, building back assurance. So we talked earlier on about things. I mean, they referred to property, plant and equipment. I think some of the issues they've experienced there is we've got valuation reports, but they don't necessarily agree to what's on our ledger as the value of assets. That's a piece of work we need to do. I've also got through half an hour without mentioning LGR, but it's a piece of work we'll need to do for LGR as well. So there's a key work stream at the moment across all councils looking at the assets we own. So we need that information's got to be right, not just for this purpose, but it's got to be right for the organisations that come after us. So it's important that we get on with that. So that's what we mean by build back. I think that's my key sort of takeaway from the report is we need to get build back on track, and I'll be taking that away to work with both Richard's team, who I know have worked really hard in the last few weeks, on what they've been getting these accounts finished.
So I'll stop you there. So I'm sure that's a question that you'll be asked a bit later on. So can I open the floor to any questions with the auditors or Simon? And I notice we've also got Richard's vote on virtually as well. So Councillor Dragnetti.
Yes. On the audit adjustments,
Can you say who the question for?
Sorry?
Can you say who the question's for?
oh well,
Alex or Neil, I suppose.
oh well, I guess Neil perhaps. Let's start it. It's on the audit adjustments. The first one is the £24 million remeasurement of the net defined benefit liability. The note is that the adjustment was to reduce the pension asset and instead reflect a liability. Is that 24.5 million pounds? Is that just arisen through a change in IFRIC 14, or is there any something substantive there?
It is a very technical audit adjustment, I would say, with that. I'm sure Simon would have some other words for it. Historically, bodies didn't really have pension assets. It was only in the last few years where they started to get some. And this is not just yourselves; this is across the board, really. With that, there were IFRIC 14 sort of has always been around, or not always, but has been around for a long time. It's not a new standard, but it only really sort of came into relevance recently. And that basically says where you've got a pension asset, there is a limit. It's referred to as asset ceiling, as what you can recognise of that asset. And in some cases, it actually says due to things called secondary funding contributions, you should actually have an additional liability instead. And that's what's happened here. The actuary provided a report that said, yeah, you've got an asset as per the initial actuary report, but you can't recognise it. You actually need an additional liability. So for South, for example, there was initially an asset recognised of 17 million, whereas there should have been a liability of 7 million. So it's then the other side of that basically just goes to the pension reserve then, so there's nothing that impacts the general fund or the bottom line or anything. Well, nothing that impacts the general fund. But it is something that is not unique to this authority in terms of where there's been adjustments. I think it may have been the case that it was relevant last year, but obviously with the disclaimed opinion and the lack of work done last year and then potentially year before, it's this first year we're sort of picking it up this year. If that helps at all, it is quite a technical area, one that we've had to brush up our knowledge on quite a bit over the last couple of years.
But we were declaring an asset of 17 million, and now it's a liability of 7. That's
right.
So, does that affect the medium-term financial forecast? No.
I hate these adjustments for pensions, to be honest. The critical thing for the medium-term financial plan is the actuarial valuation, which we've just been through. So what affects the budget is the pension contributions we have to make to the pension funds to effectively make sure that we're able to cover all the liabilities that occur thereafter. That valuation confirms that we're actually overfunded, which may seem a bit logical in the context of the conversation we've just had, but it's the key number. The trouble with these numbers is next year they'll go up, but they'll go up by the same number and they'll come down again.
Oh, right, okay.
It's one of those. The key thing for the medium-term financial plan is that actuarial valuation, which confirms our contribution rates for the next 3 years. So regardless actually of what happens with the pension fund, our contribution rates are fixed for the next 3 years, and that obviously that takes us into the authority that comes after us. What I would say is I think the Oxfordshire Pension Fund is actually pretty well funded compared to others. So, it's actually overfunded at the moment. There are pension funds out there that are way below being funded. So I think this is a technical adjustment. It's frustrating because actually the question you're asking is what's the real world impact of this number, and there isn't one. In that sense.
Right. There is no liability.
There's a liability on paper as it stands at a point in time, but
that sounds like a banker's thing, doesn't it? There's no liability, and then of course when it comes to crunch, it actually is a liability after all.
Yeah.
But there we are. I shall trust you guys.
We trust the actuary. That's the reality.
Councillor.
Thank you. Alex and Neil, thank you for your report and presenting your findings. Alex, I agree with you in regards to your traffic light system. It is very crude, but it does show you visually where the red and amber points are. And when you look at it in isolation, it could be quite alarming, or it could be concerned. So can you tell me, compared to other councils, or you mentioned the NHS, the red and the ambers that we're seeing, should we be concerned in terms of number?
In terms of the ambers, definitely not, because that's I often say this, and it doesn't always go down brilliantly, but I often say if we don't find anything as auditors, we're doing something wrong, because no audit's ever perfect. So the fact that we do find areas where we think you could improve your arrangements, i.e. the amber areas, I don't think that's unusual. The red area, the significant weakness area, is not rare. It does happen. It's probably more in the minority, if I'm honest, from certainly looking across local government. But you're certainly not an outlier, let's put it that way. So, you're not one, out of 100 or whatever. I think in my portfolio, I've got 10 local government audits. I think there were about 3, 4. So it's you're not in the majority, but neither are you a massive outlier. Does that kind of help?
Yeah, it does. As I say, I just want to know where we sit compared to others in our sector. So you're saying the red are significant, but they can be managed.
Yes, they are significant. It's because we're looking at arrangements. They are classed as what's known as significant weakness, and that's defined by the National Audit Office Code as to what a significant weakness is. So and it is subjective. I have to say, it's not like Neil's just talking about the numbers around the pensions. That's quite definitive, whether you like the numbers or not. But it's quite definitive. the VFM work is a little bit more subjective, so it is open to interpretation as to, you know, is it a significant weakness or is it not? We've determined in this case it is, as I say, we've been through peer review. Having said that, I mean, I think my personal view is that whilst this is a significant weakness, it's not like you've got a significant weakness around financial sustainability where you're about to drop off a cliff, you're about to issue Section 114, you know, things are looking really dire. Actually, I think this one, I appreciate it's going to take a bit of work, but actually potentially it's one that you could come back from fairly quickly. It's not something that I can see lingering for several years while you try and sort it out. Does that kind of, it doesn't give me sort of the heebie-jeebies, and I think, oh gosh, I've really got to worry about these entities, and actually there's some real things going on here. It's just, you know, addressing those recommendations.
Through you, Chair, can I just ask Simon to respond to that in terms of term weakness was used? How do you respond to that?
I mean, I think it needs to be seen in context. I think we've identified some areas where we need to improve. I think that's fair, and we'll take that on board. I think overall, I think our financial position is pretty good for two councils. You know, it's difficult, isn't it? Because there's a lot of numbers in a set of accounts, and you know, have I got faith in the important ones in them? Yes, I do. That would be the point I would make. I think there's a lot of analysis in here. You know, we just talked about pensions. There's fixed assets is a minefield, because you know, we can get a value or they can get a value. We can argue about them and so on. In the end of the day, does it actually matter? Does it actually have an impact on the council tax bill? No, it doesn't. So I think I'm frustrated that there's probably more reds than I'd like to see, but do they? You know, as Alex said, we can turn it around. I'm really confident on that.
Just following up with that, because obviously, let's just use one example: internal audit. That's a red. Do you have the resources to rectify that? Or do you need additional resource?
In the context of internal audit, I think we've got the right resource on that one. I think I've got a question in my mind about, for example, on the fixed asset stuff. We need to get to the bottom of that. That might, whether we actually need additional resource, or we need to prioritise that for a while. I don't know. But actually, you know, in terms of the internal audit one, I think that is something that we've been bringing back to this authority for a while. This council, this committee for a while. So I think it's definitely something that's on the radar.
Thank you, Chair. Okay. A question from Councillor Skinner, then from Councillor Gritton.
I've got to ask a question.
Well, if you did indicate.
Well, as some of you know, I'm internal audit is one of my favourite topics, because I think I started getting people some years ago to count how many serious audit findings we have, which wasn't being done at all, and they weren't being looked at. And in a sense, because we don't really have much opposition in this council, we kind of get away with it. I think if there was a serious opposition party, we'd be asked a lot more questions about why there are so many reds and why we haven't. Now, Simon, we had this discussion, and we had exactly that discussion about, were they all really red? And it seems to go around in circles. Are they all really red? Colour, yes. Is it serious? No. Well, that's a problem for this committee, because where do we focus when there are so many things? And by the way, it occurred to me thinking about this last night, we should have a very simple count each meeting, each time we look at internal audit, how many, just raw numbers of these, whatever it is, red, you know, how many are there under each heading? Are they going up or down? Just to basically, but I think you said you were going to look again, because it looks to me as though we have to redefine those classes. Now, I think Marky's question about have you got the resource is to the point, because we either need to fix them or we need to fix the categorizations, and we should do it. If I was sitting in Whitehall looking at district councils and saying which ones, which ones shall we let through this process and which ones are better not, and somebody showed me the number of outstanding reports we had, that would not go well. I'd probably be quite pleased, because it's quite an easy decision in terms of how do we stand. I don't believe we stand very well, and we should invest some of that in changing it. I mean, I completely understand the finances of this are the important thing. Can we afford to do what we're doing? Are we managing the money? But as long as we're putting real effort into internal audit and all that involves, interviewing the departments, finding, getting answers and so on, it should be done professionally. And it appears to me that we could improve that. And
I'd like to draw a line.
Yes, please do.
Look, I think the sentiment of this is pretty clear. I mean, the auditors have kind of clearly shone a light on this in quite a sharp way, and both Councillor Skinner and Councillor Carr have come up with very good questions. I mean, suggesting that things are not right. I mean, what I think I'd like you to do, Simon, is to come back to this committee fairly quickly with a view of the audit result and also the feedback you've received, with a plan of how we actually address this as a wider issue. Because I don't believe this. However, you could construe that we're not taking internal audit and its recommendations seriously. The fact we have so many persistent reds. I don't think enjoy making that statement, but that's the way it could appear.
Yes.
So I think this committee will start putting a lot of focus on this now. So I think you need to come back to us by the next meeting. I think Marky and I probably need to have a conversation with you about how, but I think we do need to kind of draw a bit of a line in the sand with this and decide how we move forward.
Could I make a very quick?
Well, I just want to say thank you both for raising this issue. Councillor Griffin is the next question. We can come back to you, Councillor Skinner.
I can be very quick because my question was basically the same as Councillor Carnes and Councillor Skinner. So
okay.
Roberts and Gregory.
Thank you.
Because what I was really worried about was we experienced significant delays in receiving information that are outside the finance department. And I wondered who that was. Are they outside our council, i.e., is it Redfern Benz and that area? And that would worry me, because when we had the 5 councils contract, that was something we kept a really close eye on, because it was a contract that covered an awful lot of areas. Prior to that, we did only have Redfern Benz outsourced to Capita, and we did have a lot of problem with it. So what's worrying me is, are we heading back into that area where, because it's only the only bit that we're outsourcing, we're not keeping a close enough eye on it. We're not getting the sort of in-depth. They always needed prodding, and I'm just wondering whether that's that area, because it's one that's alerted to me before. Has this meant that, because in previous years when we haven't had everything ticked and it hasn't all been green, we have been charged extra money for the extra work that needed to be happening. Now, I kind of heard that he said he wasn't doing that, but it's not clear from this report whether there is any extra fee going to be coming after the build back assurance work. So that was my second question.
I was going to say, I'll probably let Neil answer the second one. And I don't know if you've got any comments on the first one, Neil, but I've got some comments on the first one as well.
Yeah, I can come back on both of them to a certain extent. On the first bit, whilst I can't say who specifically the delays are with, I can tell you the areas, some of the areas we did experience significant delays, which was on our work around council tax and business rates and the reliefs in particular for those. I think so there were some other areas, but those were the two probably more significant ones. Just in terms of the fee, just in case, and the build back on that. So apologies if this doesn't answer the question, but I'll feel free to come back to me on it. So we've, in the build back section, we sort of got it split out into 3 phases, of which phase 1 has been included in this fee variation now. Phase 2 and phase 3 will follow on those. There may also be some additional work required to top up the areas such as the property, plant and equipment valuations, which we'll look to do in discussion with Simon and Richard, hopefully before the start of the 25-26 audit, so that we can start that with as clean a slate as possible. But then there probably will be fee variations in respect to those as well, because there's additional work to do to top up that. Does that answer that bit of a question?
So effectively, this has cost us some money. It wasn't clear to me how much it's cost us, but
it's details in the report, isn't it, Neil? It's in one of the, it's in the
section 8. There's a few variations in it.
So I did see it somewhere, the full amount, but I wasn't sure if that was the total extra.
That's their projection at this stage, I think. But as has been said, it's got to go through PSAA to agree anyway.
So move on.
Yeah, I just following up on the on page 19, the property, plant and equipment issues, the variance between the fixed asset register and the valuations. How many are we getting valuations on all fixed assets, or is it mainly just the property? And how many properties are involved? Is it
so Neil's popped up, but Richard will have the detail more than me.
Are we talking about hundreds of properties or 20?
Well, Richard, do you want to answer that question?
I'll try and answer it. I'm not sure quite how many properties we've got in total, probably about 400 or so, including all the bits of land and such like. I think, well, I know the main issue here was the fact that our valuation report was that we got last March was subsequently amended the following September time by the property team, and we didn't have all of those amendments in. I'm trying to think, Neil, how many properties it was. We're only talking about 10 or so, aren't we? There was the one at Wallingford, which was a significant, all of the buildings at Wallingford Sports Trust, which we didn't have in our ledgers at all. And that, well, Simon might be able to explain the background to those.
Yeah, I'd say something like that, Richard. Yeah, 10 to 15 maybe. And the Wallingford one is something that we would be looking to work on as part of the build back, just to make sure that we're happy with the treatment on that.
Right. So without the 732,000 difference between the on one asset, which as you mentioned, which is quite a big difference, isn't it? Between your fixed asset register valuation and the valuer's valuation.
I'm not sure exactly which asset that was, but it wouldn't have been a difference between what we've got on the asset register and the valuer's first valuation. It would have been a movement to their second one, because they gave us a final version in the autumn. Right. And there was quite a lot of movement between the first and the second valuations. That they send one in, and then it's checked and challenged by our property team, and then we get another one. And usually there's hardly any changes, but this year there seemed to be a lot, which unfortunately my team weren't fully aware of.
So, given it's quite a detailed question, but would you be happy if they responded separately?
Oh, no, that's right. I think understand the problems of that. You get a valuation every 6 months and it can change. All these valuers, I guess they have a view, don't they? Okay, thank you. Richard.
Thanks.
I believe Councillor Skinner, you have in order.
Going back to the internal audit reports, I can't put my hand on that, but the report from the auditor was fairly clear, and there was also a response which just said from management. It didn't say from whom. I would quite like to see that response. I felt the response was not adequate. I would quite like to see the response say how this was going to be solved. Reading the response, possibly with a certain amount of cynicism, I read it as, oh yeah, that's just how it is. There didn't seem to be any prospect of that.
I'm sure if you could find a specific one with that reference, and then Simon can email it to Simon, and I'm sure Simon's prepared to respond back.
If it's possible to change it still. I mean, I just felt as a, doesn't make us look good.
True. Councillor Griffin.
And so I had a small point first and then a question, if that's all right. So I think I heard Alex say that there was a recommendation that perhaps officers could come to this meeting as some kind of accountability on various audit actions, which I think is a good idea. And I think it was nice to see that at the last meeting. So hopefully that is something that we're going to see throughout the year. And that was nice that happened.
I can confirm that does happen.
Yeah. And then I suppose this kind of follows on from this, is that obviously we recently set the budget for the coming year, but we're looking at these reports now. So this is a question really for Simon through the chair, if that's okay.
Yes.
Are you happy that there's the money in this year's budget that we've just set to be able to pay these extra fees for building back and for extra work that the officers need to do?
Yes, I mean, the budget we've just set this contingency, and there's also, there's full budgets in for Richard's team, and for the full payment of audit fees as budgeted. So yes, between those, that combination of things, there's enough money in the budget.
So, side on that theme, my worry about this is that whilst both councils have stable financials, we have an unqualified audit with quite a large number of issues attached to both councils. We've got to actually get to a qualified audit within the next period will require a lot of management focus and resource to get there. I'm going to have to mention LGR, and I know from comments that you've made, Simon, about how much officers' time has now been soaked into LGR. My real question is, do you have the physical resource and the kind of management headspace and time to actually address some of these issues so we can get to a qualified audit?
I think that's a very good question in the context of where we are. I mean, I think I'm very mindful that, if I compare my time to 12 months ago, I'm spending far more time on LGR than I did, as you can imagine. Luckily, at the sort of level of Richard's team, Victoria's team in terms of internal audit, it hasn't filtered down as much to them. It is something we've put under review. As you're aware, both councils have put £3 million aside for the extra costs of LGR. This is one of the extra costs of LGR is actually, we will have to do it whilst keeping the day job running. In the context of some, particularly thinking about the asset register stuff, the list of outstanding audit recommendations, we've got to get that sorted. We've got to get that all sorted before, before vesting day. So we will need to find additional. If we need to find additional resource, we will have to go and find it.
So my problem with that statement is a little bit is that the next period has already effectively started, and I know how hard it is to onboard capable resource who can actually do the kind of work that we're talking about, which this kind of work is most successful when people have some common intimacy with the organisation and know how it works. So hopefully you're already flagging the resource issues you need and are in the process of acquiring those resources.
I mean, the first stage is at the flagging. The acquiring it would be the next step, but at the moment I'm sort of flagging some of the resource issues we've got.
So I think it's very safe to say that this is a kind of I hate using the term red flag, but it's a bit of a red flag for me about where we are right now, starting next period to get to that qualified audit.
Yeah.
So I think this is something that we will need to discuss on a regular basis, and I feel that if you get pushback within the SMT about these resources being prioritised in this area, then you need to flag that back to us so we can help assist resolving this issue. Sorry to go into speech mode, but has anybody else got any questions on this item? Councillor Robertson.
Yes, I think it does. It kind of yells that we need extra resource in here to be able to deal with this. Are we intending to hire in that resource, or are we intending to sort of recruit permanently? So I'll go to an outside consultant or an in-house.
I think Simon needs to come back and tell us how it's going to work, because we can't solution it in here. But I suspect it's going to be external resource, because the internal resource will be required for LGR.
You're quite right about resources fairly thin on the ground at this point in time.
Frankly, good quality resource. I mean, we've got some great officers, but there's not enough of them to do things we need to do.
Yes,
it's kind of taken away from particularly from the commentary from Neil and from Alex.
I think particularly given Councillor Roberts' comments about the difficulty of Excel, it would be perhaps worthwhile for the auditors to maintain a list and a timeline for information that they need to require, and from whom and when they get it, so that we don't.
I'll take time question on this item before we move on. More question? Thank you. Can I just say to Alex and to Neil to thank you very much for your input this evening, and for Richard, obviously, but I realise how, as somebody who's been involved in many non-government and non-local government audits in the past, I know how much hard work goes into audits and how difficult they can be. So I'd just like to give you the committee's thanks, if you like, for all the hard work you've done, and obviously to Simon. So procedurally, we now need to come to a vote. We need to split the vote between South Oxfordshire and the Vale. So I'll take South Oxfordshire first. There are two reports that we need to note. First one is the auditor's completion report. So the resolution is to note the draft external auditor's audit completion report of 2024 to 25. Secondly, to delegate to the head of finance in consultation with the co-chairs to approve the final report, subject to there being no material changes being confirmed to the committee by Bishop Fleming. And the audit report, to note the external auditor's audit results report for 2024 to 2025, and to authorise the head of finance in consultation with the co-chairs to approve the actions from the external auditor's report, subject to there being no material changes in the report being confirmed to the committee by Bishop Fleming. Can I have a proposer?
I propose that, without repeating what you just said, we follow and approve those four recommendations and note it.
I'll second that. Thank you. So I take a big deep breath. I need to do the same again for the Vale. So the Vale of Whitehorse Council, District Council resolves to note the draft of the auditor's audit completion report 2024-25, to delegate to the head of finance in consultation with the co-chairs to approve the final report, subject to there being no material changes being confirmed to the committee by Bishop Fleming. and also to note the external audit results report 2024-2025 and to authorise the head of finance in consultation with the co-chairs to approve the actions from the external audited report, subject to there being no material change in the report being confirmed to the committee by Bishop Fleming. So can I have a proposer for that, please? Second. Thank you. We have a vote. All those in favour? Unanimously. Before I kind of move on, I think a couple of actions that come out of this assignment around the kind of governance red flags. Red rating. Sorry. So I think we're expecting a formal response back to you on that one about how we kind of move this forward. Which so I know we've not discussed it, but I think Councillor would like to discuss this directly with you fairly urgently. Sure. And then secondly, the trajectory from having an unqualified audit to a qualified audit, we'd like to understand how we're going to get there. Clearly, that's something that needs to be brought to a JAG meeting for the committee to hear the deliberation. Yeah. But again, I think we need a formal response from you on what's happening to move that forward. And I did write to you about this, and I think you know my concerns and the level of detail I'm expecting in that particular item. That's okay. Thank you. We now move on to item 8, which is the letters of representation to the external auditor. And for new members of the committee, these are basically affirmation from the council senior management that all relevant information has been provided. So Simon, do you want to list yours?
Yeah, I mean, basically they're also included, effectively the draft of this is provided by Bishop Fleming that we have to comply with, because we're basically writing to them to say that, you know, we've been open and honest with all that sort of transactions and dealings with them. So it's pretty standard. The letter is signed by the co-chair. I've just been looking at you. It always used to be signed by the co-chairs and myself. I'm trying to work. Remember, it's actually signed by myself. Looking at the bottom, I might just get Alex or Neil to just confirm if they're still on the call. But we're asking you to confirm that you're happy that it's signed by certainly the co-chair and me if needs be. Alex has popped up.
Yeah, apologies. I would normally expect the letter of rep to be signed by the chair of the audit committee at which the accounts are being approved, because obviously they're those charged with governance rather than the CFO. That would be my understanding.
I've seen it. It has been done before, both jointly, but I've just noticed it's just the co-chairs needed this time. That's absolutely fine.
I don't think it's actually set out anywhere, because I think we have looked at this quite a lot actually. I don't think it's actually set out exactly who needs to sign it, but I think my view, as I say, is because it's as a committee you're approving the accounts and therefore you need to sign the letter of rep. Whether the CFO needs to sign it or not, I mean, Simon, if you want to sign it, feel free. I think Nick might have a comment.
Yeah, so Nick, did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, funnily enough, my last authority, this point came up there, and we couldn't find any guidance that actually said how it was necessary to be done. So it's not, I don't believe it's statutory. However, I do agree with what Alex has said, that it makes more natural sense that it should come from you as chair. So that would be my preference. A counter signature by the CFO, I don't see a problem with it. And if it's become practice, that's fine. But I don't think we're going to be able to go away and get you any further detail. But I will have a look with Simon afterwards. But I'm pretty sure it's going to be you from my experience 2-3 years ago.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from the committee on this item?
I just think, just to make it clear that all three of us sign it, so that I think just do that.
Yes, I was going to say it's actually no. Okay, so right, so there's no question or no discussion on this item. So I need to take this by the individual councils. So we'll do SODC first again. SODC District Council resolves to authorise the head of finance in consultation with the chairs, that's co-chairs of JAG, to approve the signing of the finalised letters of representation to the external auditor, subject to no material changes in the letters being confirmed to the committee by Bishop Fleming. Can I have a vote for this?
I think it should be you to propose on signing. I'll second.
Do you need to vote on it?
Yeah, we just voted.
Yeah, I know, but I didn't do it last time because only 2 of you.
Yes.
But yes, so therefore, that's agreed. The Vale of Whitehorse, unfortunately, we do have to vote this. The Vale of Whitehorse District Council resolves to authorise the Head of Finance in consultation with the chairs to approve the signing of the finalised letters of representation to the external auditor, subject to no material changes in being confirmed to committee by Bishop Fleming. Can I have a proposal for this, please? Mr. Roberts, thank you. Seconder? Councillor Skinner, thank you. Don't take a vote on this. All those in favour? That's unanimously. Thank you. Now we move on to one of my favourite subjects. Item 9, the statement of accounts for 2024 to 2025. This will be presented by Simon. She'd like to start and probably explain what the statement of accounts is up front, just for new members.
No, that's fine. So effectively, we're required on an annual basis to prepare and publish an audit that. And a set of accounts that's been subject to an audit process. I think it's probably fair to say these days that the draft accounts have to be published by the 30th of June in the financial year. Historically, the final accounts normally have to be published by the end of September because of the issues with the audit workload we're aware of. The deadline for this year is the end of February. The statement of accounts are prepared in accordance with international financial reporting standards, which means if you're trying to compare them to our scrutiny committee reports, you'll find them very different. For example, our scrutiny reports and actor reports are prepared on a basis of what's chargeable to council tax, which is defined in legislation, whereas international financial reporting standards need you to take into account the whole economic, what's going on in the council as a whole, which is why you'll struggle. The accounts are very long and complex. I think when I started in local government, there were about 30 pages, and now 100 pages at each council. But they, as you've heard tonight, that we are prepared and they've been published. They've been subject to a statutory public inspection period. They've been subject to the audit process you've heard described earlier on. And we're now looking for you to approve them for publication, which involves, and it is definitely me and the chair, the co-chair signing in various places, but the statements as complete, and includes the opinion of the auditors that we've just discussed. So that's a sort of brief introduction. If there's any detailed questions, Richard's on hand. He and his team have pulled the accounts together. I'm sure you'll appreciate them 100 pages per council. There's a lot of work goes into preparing the accounts. And big thanks to Richard and his team for their efforts.
That was your questions then. Well, most people are kind of collecting their thoughts on that. Given the medium-term financial plan relies on reserves, what trigger points or indicators does management use to prompt corrective action if reserves begin to fall faster than the forecast?
I mean, I think in reality, the reserves are only going to be affected by revenue outturn or capital outturn. So we use budget monitoring, obviously will tell us how we're doing against budget. So, and historically, we have seen a pattern in the last 2 or 3 years where we've actually tended to overspend on net expenditure, and in part that's because of inflation, but the flip side of inflation is interest rates. So actually, we've actually overall underspent at both councils due to interest rates being high. So we kept that under review. But I think if we got to a situation where budget monitoring was showing that was not on track, then SMT would need to look in particular at where the overspends are occurring, what's driving them, and review potential actions that need to be taken to correct that. All in the context these days of LGR, of course. That's one of the challenges we have going forward is, there's now an expectation that we will carry on running the services we currently provide up until LGR. And I think that's one of the challenges in particular at VOWH that will be an issue. the good news for us is actually on our current projections, you know, both councils have enough reserves to see them through the medium-term financial plan period, which is greater than the life expectancy of both councils given LGR. And what we are not subject to is the sort of demand pressures that upper tier authorities have. We don't have that level of demand pressure that can have, there's a big swings you see in upper tier council budgets. I think our key drivers at the moment are inflation and interest rates. That's what's going to drive any pressures that we have.
Thank you. Any questions now? Giving everyone a chance to think. Right, looks like we have no questions. In that case, we need to take a vote. Oh, sorry.
I was going to ask about the collection of council tax. We collected 3 million more than was predicted. Is that less than normal? Because there's always a discrepancy on that figure, isn't there? But that seemed to me to be lower than it often is.
Can you just say where you're seeing that? Where is that number?
It says collection figure.
What page in the pack?
Page 12, under the veil, on item 9. Council collection fund balance at the end of the year was 3 million. This will be redistributed.
For council tax, that sounds about right. Actually, it's around that sort of number. Yeah, if that's yeah.
I mean, I know there's always a discrepancy, but I thought that was probably slightly less than we'd seen in previous years.
What we did do a couple of years ago, which is more of a budget issue, is we used the budget to collect 98% of council tax. We changed it to 98.5. So what that does, it puts the tax base up. So it means that the surplus should go down a bit. So we'd expect it to be slightly lower than previous years because we've made that adjustment.
Yes, I didn't know that we'd done that. Okay, thank you.
As you calculated.
Yes, sorry, my question now. On page 41, which is note 15 of the expenditure and income analysed by nature, we have the. I just wondering why the employee benefit expense has gone from last year. We stated it was 14,454,000, and this year, 24-25, it's 27,321,000. That's quite a big sort of doubling. That's not the pension. This is on.
It probably would be the pensions, to be honest.
So this pension, fiddling thing, good. Which is just a notional transaction, notional adjustment. Yeah.
Okay. Any more questions? I think we're finally. Okay, so we now need to have another vote on this particular item. Again, it has to be done for individual councils. So I'll take South first. South, obviously, the District Council resolves to authorise the Head of Finance in consultation with the co-chairs to approve the South Oxfordshire District Council Statement of Accounts 24-25, subject to there being no material changes in the statements, being confirmed to the committee by Bishop Fleming. As was proposed, please.
I'm happy to propose.
Thank you, Councillor Card. And as a seconder. Thank you.
Voted.
Unanimous. Now we need to move on to the more complex Vale of Whitehorse. The resolution is that the Vale of Whitehorse District Council resolves to authorise the Head of Finance in consultation with the co-chairs to approve the Vale of Whitehorse District Council Statement of Accounts 24-25, subject to there being no material changes in statements, being confirmed to the committee by Bishop Fleming. Can I have a proposal for this, please? It's a draw. Councillor Griffin,
Okay.
have a seconder, please.
John seconded, or the only one to propose it?
I'll second it. Can I have a vote on that item, please? Unanimous. Thank you. Thank you all. All right. So now we move on to item 10, the annual governance statements. Now, this item is going to be presented by Yvonne Cutler-Greaves, who I do know is on the call. So, Yvonne, if you'd like to present the annual governance statement for 24-25. Thank you.
Yes. the statement of annual governance statement explains how the council complies with the code of corporate governance that we've set out across the councils. It's the annual governance statement is reviewed by the council's existing governance arrangements against this code of governance. The code comprises of the council's systems and processes, cultures and values for the direction and control of the authority and its activities through which it accounts to and engages with the community. The code shows actions and behaviours taken by the council that demonstrate good governance and lists evidence supporting the council's compliance. And it also assesses the effectiveness of the council's governance arrangements against the local code. It has identifies risks associated with the council going forward and demonstrates the actions it's taken to mitigate those risks going forward for the financial year 24-25.
Thank you. Trust we've all read the report. Does anyone have any questions for Yvonne? Councillor Griffin.
So, we heard earlier in the meeting about some concerns with governance in the year 24-25, and I get the impression from responses from other officers that some of those things were already being addressed and issues picked up on. So I was wondering if you could highlight if there was anything specific in this year's governance statement that's kind of new or changed since last year.
Are you referring to the 24-25 governance statement we're talking about now, or the governance statements that we'll be preparing for 25-26?
Sorry. Yes, that we will be preparing. Yes, sorry, thank you. Yes.
Okay.
If I'm allowed to ask that forward-looking question.
You are allowed to. I'm sure you are. Yes. There's a lot of work is underway, obviously, across the councils. We have the risks that were identified in the 24-25, namely the third-party contracts, and obviously reduction in funding and the corporate governance, failure of corporate governance, which are all the key things that are identified for future action. They're all still on the corporate risk register, but are being mitigated with. There's a lot of work underway to mitigate a lot of the risks associated with these, and particularly the number one with the third-party contracts that will be reduced significantly in the next accounts annual governance statement, and obviously the future reduction in funding will also be addressed because we've obviously now got we know more about the fair funding review from government, and that will obviously reduce that risk, and it will no longer be as big a risk or an issue going forward. With regards to corporate governance, that's work in progress, but again, there is a lot of work underway on that. I don't know if Nick Bennett, you want to elaborate more on what we're doing to mitigate those risks?
I'm really sorry, Yvonne, you're going to have to repeat that because my sound went completely in the last 30 seconds. I'm so
really
sorry.
Very loud, Nick, because you couldn't hear me. Okay, I should know. Okay, it's around the governance risk issue on the statement, which is about failure of corporate governance leading to negative impact on service delivery. And the work that we've been doing, there's a lot of mitigation in there. So we regularly update every quarter on this particular risk. And Nick, you've got a lot of work underway on this going forward, haven't you, in terms of the code in respect of gifts and hospitality, for example. Yeah, and the projects and programmes register and monitoring those, and also the contract register. So there's a lot of work underway on those at the moment.
Yeah, well, just to confirm what Yvonne's, I feel a bit of an idiot now, but yes, Yvonne is right. We've had work that's been going on all of those things. They're being monitored on a quarterly basis, discussed both with Yvonne, but also with internal audit, and also in elements of it with Simon. The contract register changes in particular have been double-edged because they are both to make sure that the contract register is up to date, which is a requirement anyway, I think, of good practices. But also in anticipation of local government reorganisation, the legal and democratic with financial colleagues, including a gentleman who was with us as a consultant, have worked really hard at getting our contract register completely up to date including all of the relevant signatures in readiness so that we can novate the contracts to whatever the future will require us to do, as in move it from us to whichever future organisation we've got. So there's been a huge amount of work done on that. Some of it publicised internally to colleagues more widely, and I'm having another meeting shortly with Andy on the press team about what we need to do about getting the message out on good governance generally for all officers. As part of that, we're also looking at setting up meetings with Simon as Section 151 officer and Adriana as the new chief executive about building that governance message and the importance of good governance for all decision making. Again, sorry to have to ask if I have repeated myself, but it's the IT I blame. But thank you. I'm very happy to answer any specific questions your members have, Chair.
Thank you. Do you feel your question was answered, Councillor Griffin?
Sufficiently, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any more? I'll let Councillor Roberts go next.
Yes, I mean, mine's kind of slightly an odd way round question. We highlighted the number of third-party contracts coming up last year and saying, you know, this is clearly a risk because we have major contracts coming to an end in the same year. Then we also had LGR coming at us, which has put stress and drain and gone on the risk register. What's worrying me is that these are risks that are easily identified. And what effect has all this extra work on this year had on the day-to-day business as usual? And has that, you know, because we don't clearly monitor all of business as usual. And I'm wondering whether the business as usual has become stressed and slipped because everybody's concentration has been on these major risks. And so that's the worry for me coming out of this, and also some of the areas that have come from the accounts, and a general feeling that we've been stretched in all directions. And have we managed to keep all business as usual risks under control as well?
Nick, do you want to answer that question?
If I may, Yvonne, I know you'll have views. So, Chair, through you, the legal team, we keep pretty strong records on our time and what we spend it on. When I look at my schedule for the last 4 months, which I had to do recently, I'm spending about 20 to 25% of my time on LGR. Now, I don't think I'm unique in that in the senior managers group. Simon, I would suspect, spends somewhat more of it because of his leadership role in the function. But approximately a fifth quarter of my time is being spent on that. You will be aware from Cabinet's reporting that they are putting a lot of effort, have put a lot of effort with scrutiny into looking at the forward plans, because the business as usual is challenging in that environment. The additional large projects is challenging in that environment, even more challenging, I would say, because you're using the resources that you've already got and trying to spread them across a number of tasks. And so that is a really important piece of work. And what we don't want to do is give any concern to our public that their needs aren't still being taken care of, because we still have those duties. We still have all those people working really hard to deliver excellent services for our communities. But we are spread thin, and I won't pretend otherwise. But I think the service that we're going through the service planning exercise at the moment, and all of the managers are being asked to review their service plans in light of LGR. We've got all the things that Yvonne has talked about already eloquently earlier. We have the forward plan being revisited, and you'll see that's being trimmed to reflect the fact that we are moving into an LGR environment. And of course, coming down the tracks, we have Section 24, which will force us to make certain changes on particularly spending. So there are changes which are forced on us, and there are changes which we are trying to manage. But to reassure your committee, management is trying to ensure, with under the guidance of cabinets, that we are directing our energies where it needs to be to ensure that all that needs to be done is done. But it is going to continue to get harder and harder, and there will continue to be those pressures from the side. Though as I say, what we can do by a service planning or more widely, we are doing.
And I think with the next, with the next governance statement, there will be a lot more regarding LGR and the impact that's having going forward and what we're doing about it. As I'm going to be reporting to you next month, I'm here again in person to talk about LGR and the risks associated with LGR and the impact on our corporate risk register. So I think you'll see there's going to be this annual governance statement this year, 25-26. We'll have a lot more LGR impetus on there, and it won't be unfamiliar because you'll have looked at it from the risk register reviews that I take to you quarterly and half yearly, so we work through those and monitor those through yourselves in terms of mitigation.
So my follow-up question to that is, how are we going to identify the risks that business as usual? You say the risk is LGR, that's preparing for all the things we need to do to move everything across. But my worry is that we're not having a little risk of the things we ordinarily day-to-day deliver, and some of those falling through the cracks whilst we're doing everything else. So I'm wondering how, when you do report on the
we've identified that risk.
Hold on a second. You've got to remember that just to be clear, this is the annual government statement for 24-25.
Yeah.
Your questions are absolutely valid and concern me as well. I think they concern everybody around here. But I do think we have to recognise that the AGS we're discussing is the 24-25 period. Simon, I believe you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I mean, obviously this is backward looking, because I think there are references to LGR in here, but you know, it came along very late in the day in 24-25, and I'm looking at the current governance issues and improvement plan progress update page. That's going to look very different next year in next year's AGS. But lots of this document will look the same. You know, in terms of the processes we've got. One thing I was just going to give some assurance. I mean, clearly there are, you know, it's senior managers that are impacted a lot by LGR. You know, if you've heard Nick's view, I would probably disagree that that's the amount of time I'm spending on LGR is that sort of percentage as well. However, for example, at the other end of the spectrum, we've got all our outsourced services, many of which are what the public see day to day. They're, you know, in many ways they're unaffected because, you know, they're outsourced. We've got, you know, people in the organisation who are, you know, quietly getting on with their day job the way they've always done. I think that the risk which you know, put forward very, very well earlier on, Mike, is the risk of, you know, senior management having too much on with LGR and keeping everything going. But as Nick's given his thoughts on, you know, how that has been, that's certainly been recognised and is under review and you know, and needs to be addressed if needs be.
And I welcome Councillor Roberts' question, but because it needs to be reflected in the next AGS when it comes out, and hopefully the kind of assurance narrative, if you like, will reflect what was very much a changing situation. But I suspect this committee is going to talk about LGR and the impact on services and risk throughout the next period. So it's a great question, and we won't be shying away from it, I think.
It is a risk on the register, Councillor Roberts. It is there on the risk register, corporate and LGR. So it's been added on to. Yes.
And how we strike the balance between LGR and delivering the BAU services. But at the end of the day, this is all paid for by council tax, whichever way you look at it. And we have this responsibility, well, everybody has this responsibility for services to our customers, our residents, I should say.
I think Simon sort of touched upon or answered part of my question, so I'll ask it anyway. It was really in regards to the improvement plan progress update. Yvonne, could you just say, are there any that are still incomplete?
Well, the governance, there's a lot of work, so it's still work in progress, the governance issue, the governance action. With regards to the third-party contracts, that will be complete next time because of LGR, but also we are actually it's nearly mitigated that particular risk, and that should come off our register in the next couple of months or so. With regards to the reduction in funding, well, it's a different risk now. We've reviewed the risk, and there are 2 risks on there that are different, and they're nothing to do with this particular risk anymore. So you can say that has come off, but it's actually been revised and reviewed in terms of, or in light of where we are currently.
The particular thing on that risk too was obviously until Christmas we've been waiting for a multi-year settlement for some time. So the underlying point of the second risk on there was uncertainty of the future. We now have greater certainty. So, but it now places the councils in very different positions. And in fact, one of the things this will have to reflect next year, this will look what that risk morphs into will be different for South than it will for Vale, because they're in 2 now different financial positions.
And just for the purposes of the committee, could you just tell us how often you'll be reporting back to us so we know what's happening for next year?
Yes, I do a quarterly reporting back to yourselves. We do a quarterly summary and a 6-monthly full report. So our last quarterly summary was January, and the next full report is March. And I'll be following on again with a quarterly in June and a full report again October. So on and so forth, unless you require more with regards to LGR going forward, more reporting maybe every 2 months. But I think a quarterly shows we've made some changes, hopefully. It's enough adequate time to show we've made changes in certain mitigations rather than monthly. So it'll be quarterly and half yearly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? If I could just thank you for the report and obviously for the rest of the team who've been involved in it. I mean, I hopefully Simon forwarded the email I sent to him on the critique of the.
Yeah.
I mean, I think my overriding concern is how we learn lessons from what's happened during that 24-25 period. And then if I could encourage you, if as the opportunity arises before you finalise your report, is to put a little bit more in there about what lessons have been learned and what we should be looking to focus on from an insurance perspective going forward. Because I think you can tell from we sat through the whole of this meeting, I think you realise we're going to be a lot more focused on some of these areas kind of going forward. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Nichols.
Thank you. So we need to vote on this particular agenda item. Again, I'll be separating out the 2 councils. So first of all, South Oxford District Council resolves to approve the South Oxfordshire District Council Annual Business Statement 24-25. Can I have a propose to that, please?
I'm happy to propose.
Thank you, Councillor Cunt. Second.
I'll second it.
Thank you. I don't think we need a vote because it's unanimous. The Vale of Whitehorse resolves to approve the Vale of Whitehorse District Council Annual Governance Statement 24-25. Can I have a proposer, please? Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Seconder. Thank you, Councillor Skinner. Can we take a vote? Unanimous. Right. We now come to item 11, which of course we covered during item 7, so we can skip straight on to item 12, which is the work programme. Is there anything that was just everyone's seen?
I can just update committee.
Okay.
So the work programme has been updated and republished to include the cyber security update as requested at the last committee for the October meeting. Apart from that, it's the same as it was before.
Are there any questions from members about that? I think it reflects what we discussed. Right. If you recall, at the start of the meeting, we
just need to note the work programme, don't we?
Not in my
which is noted, shouldn't we?
Oh, yes. Do we all agree we note the work programme?
Yeah, I propose.
Second.
Yeah, all in favour.
Thank you. And then move on to item 13, which is about exclusion of the public. In the minutes we approved from the 27th of January, part of that session was confidential. So part of the minutes reflect that confidentiality. Can I ask if any members want to discuss anything in those minutes? Because if they do, we'll need to move into confidential session. If not, we can just vote to approve them and stay as we are. I think everyone's happy. Right, so the members asked to consider the, can I have a proposal to accept the exempt minutes from the meeting on the 27th of January 26? Seconder? And can we vote to approve them? Thank you. And now we come to the end of the agenda. Thank you all for being here today and for bearing with us. It was quite a long meeting. I can now declare the meeting closed. Can you stop the live stream? Thank you.
Susie, please can you stop the broadcast?